Everyone thinks of this aircraft as a passenger aircraft, but it is also used to carry cargo. It is not one of those huge six-engine monsters or a double-decker. With this aircraft, Russia is preparing to return to where it left off. Not a whisper, but a resounding return. Because the MC-21 is much more than an aeroplane. It is a flying declaration of engineering audacity, political independence, and the will to end Western monopoly. In this comprehensive analysis, we explore the challenges in the supply chain, the technological developments underpinning Russia's bold entry into the medium-range aircraft market, and whether the MC-21 will be accepted by the world. This aircraft is much more than an engineering study. It is a statement. From its spacious cabin to its composite wings, from the strategic importance of the PD-14 engine to the challenge of international certification, this aircraft has come up with an idea that will erase the idea of the aeroplane from the minds of the world. But is the world ready to read it? At first glance, the Irkut MC-21 may look like a typical aircraft. It is a giant aircraft, but there are no stairs among the aircraft. If Russia produces an aircraft that can compete with other aircraft, this aircraft will stand out and everyone is afraid of it. Russia has never been able to compete in the aircraft category since 1990. After the fall of Tupolev and Ilyushin, models such as Boeing 737 and Airbus A320 dominated the market. However, Russia has come up with such an idea that Russia is now saying that we are here too. The Irkut MC-21, which will make its first flight in the early 2020s, is much more than an engineering study. It is a strategic challenge, a political statement, and an economic statement. The reason is that this aircraft will only be used with materials made by Russia. What makes this so important? Technically, the MC-21 is a medium-range, narrow-body aircraft capable of carrying 150 to 210 passengers. It competes directly with the 737 MAX and A320neo families. However, it is different in that competition is not limited to capacity or range. This includes supply chains, engine choices, software infrastructure, and even airframe materials. In short, Russia is trying to reduce its dependence on Western aviation. But can the MC-21 really succeed? United Aircraft Corporation, UAC, is a huge company responsible for the MC-21. This umbrella has brought together companies such as Irkut and Yakovlev to revitalize Russia's own passenger aircraft sector. So what is the technical strength of the MC-21? At first, competitors' engines were put in. One of the most notable models of the Airbus A320neo family is the Pratt & Whitney PW1400G. However, Russia has drastically changed its plans following the Ukraine crisis and the sanctions that started in 2014. If you don't give us an engine, we will make our own engine and put it in. As a result, the Aviat Vigital PD-14 engine appeared. Since Soviet times, Russia had not produced a modern commercial turbofan engine from scratch until the PD-14. This is the basis for the MC-21 to be labeled Made in Russia. However, the engine is not the only factor. The most striking feature of this aircraft is that it is made of carbon. Most of the wings and wing box were made of carbon fiber. However, Russia turned to domestic material producers after Western composite suppliers withdrew due to sanctions. As a result, the MC-21 310 variant was developed, featuring only domestic components. This version is both technically sophisticated and politically ambitious. Since the fuselage of the MC-21 is wider than the A320 and 737, people fly more comfortably, and their feedback is also very positive. Indeed, the cabin of this aircraft is wider than that of the Airbus A320 and even the 737. In the narrow-body segment, this small difference provides a significant benefit in terms of passenger comfort. Larger overhead luggage compartments, wider aisles in double-seat configurations, and possibly a more spacious flight are all features of the aircraft. But being attractive on paper is not enough. To date, more than 270 orders have been placed for the MC-21. I want to say something bad, that these are orders only from its home country, that is, from Russia. Aeroflot's subsidiary Rossiya Airlines is the biggest customer. What is the reason why this aircraft cannot be sold in the West? The answer is obvious: certification. At present, neither the FAA, USA, nor EASA, Europe, seems to recognize the MC-21. This situation involves political relations as well as technical competence. Western states want the MC-21 to be certified, but since it is not, it is closed for use in other countries. This prevents it from achieving worldwide success for now. What about China? Or Iran? Or the anti-Western blocs of Southeast Asia? This may be where the MC-21's true potential lies. Russia hopes to use this aircraft as a geopolitical tool as much as a product. Geopolitical balances, rather than engineering, may determine the fate of the MC-21 on a global scale, because this aircraft is a political weapon or power against the West. In addition to the MC-21, Russia wants to create its own aviation ecosystem. In addition to the aircraft itself, other components include the engine, landing gear, avionics systems, software infrastructure, and maintenance chain. All of them are made in Russia. This makes the aircraft the focal point of a penalty-proof, closed system. To put it briefly, we can fly without being dependent on the outside world. But how will it sell in this isolation? In this case, alternative alliances will be useful because the desire to make agreements, etc., with China, given that China's own narrow-body aircraft, C919, is still in limited production and has certification problems. Can Russia enter the Chinese market with the MC-21? Theoretically, yes. Although this is a bit difficult, it is not considered impossible by engineers. Why is it difficult? The reason is that China is also investing in its own country, but Russia also has other options. Sanctioned countries such as Iran, Belarus, North Korea, and Venezuela, as well as some Asian and African countries that avoid contact with the West in these markets, the MC-21 has to knock on the door of this aircraft when they cannot afford other aircraft. This is a first demonstration. The technological sustainability of the MC-21 is a more important question. Is the production line moving fast enough? Is this aircraft that safe? Is it possible to expand the maintenance infrastructure and spare parts globally? Because maintaining the functionality of an aircraft for 30 years is a very different matter from simply producing an aircraft. Boeing and Airbus have an infrastructure where the power comes from and a service network of their own in thousands of places. For the MC-21, this level is still far away. However, Russia is now relying on this project more than ever. Previous attempts, such as the Sukhoi Superjet 100, failed due to their dependence on Western components. The MC-21 differs in that it strives for full autonomy. However, the cost of achieving this goal is high. The aircraft first set foot on Earth in 2017. This footstep was delayed for 5 years because of the Westerners. By the end of 2025, the first commercial deliveries are expected. Only 36 aircraft can be produced per year. To compete with the Airbus A320 or Boeing 737, this number must be in the hundreds. Could the MC-21 really be the killer of the Boeing 737 MAX or Airbus A320neo? We can see this only in papers. Firstly, the cabin. The A320 and 737 have smaller fuselage diameters than the MC-21. What does this mean? A wider aisle, wider overhead luggage compartments, and wider passenger seats. And it means more passenger enjoyment. The MC-21's 3+3 layout is the same as that of other narrow-body aircraft, but it is more spacious inside. This feature makes it the best aircraft for long-range flights. Also, the pressurization system is different. The cabin pressure of the MC-21 can be adjusted up to 6,000 feet. Compared to the A320 and 737, this is a feature that improves the flight experience and reduces headaches and fatigue. Wide-body aircraft such as the Boeing 787 also have this system. In this sense, the MC-21 is unique. Its aerodynamic efficiency is also impressive. The wings of the aircraft are made of lightweight materials. This is to consume less fuel. Advanced wing geometry and winglet-like wingtips to reduce drag. With the PD-14 engine, the fully indigenous MC-21 310 version is expected to operate 10 to 15% more efficiently. These advantages alone are not enough to gain a competitive advantage. The size and global reach of the Boeing 737 MAX and Airbus A320neo families are the biggest advantages. The features that are ahead of this aircraft are respectively a global maintenance infrastructure, qualified technicians, a fleet of thousands of aircraft and spare parts, easily accessible at every airport. Of course, trust is another important factor that should not be overlooked. Passengers, airlines, and regulators trust aircraft with years of stability and a solid history. This aircraft has not yet been able to do this and is on the point of going down in history. Even minor problems in the early years can be exaggerated. For example, the MC-21 may suffer from the Superjet 100's low customer satisfaction in Western markets. But Russia has big plans for this aircraft. Over time, the MC-21 could serve as a platform as well as a civilian passenger aircraft, carry load, assisting with military supplies, co-production agreements for assembly lines in other countries, special government use, VIP jet. Similar to China's C919, countries outside the traditional Western order may find the MC-21 a desirable alternative. Combine this with engine and aircraft maintenance, and it would be great. Ultimately, though, the key question is this: can an aircraft built outside the West operate according to Western regulations? In addition to engineering, diplomacy, certification, supply chains, and international aviation standards will also play a role in the future of the MC-21. The MC-21 is considered a certainty to reach this point. Flight tests are progressing rapidly. The first commercial deliveries are planned, and Irkut is about to make history as the first aircraft to be built without buying materials from the West. However, a very important question now arises. Will the MC-21 only serve the Russian market domestically, or will it appear in other countries? The first important customers will be the Russian domestic market, especially state-sponsored airlines such as Aeroflot and Russia. Putin has already ordered to buy these aircraft. This means that the aircraft will be dependent on domestic demand in the first years. However, the real match will take place abroad. Three situations now await the MC-21. Scenario 1, regional growth. Sanctioned countries or countries far from the West are recognizing the MC-21 as an alternative aircraft. Some Central Asian countries, Iran, Venezuela, Myanmar, and Africa, have started infrastructure construction for this aircraft. Even if the aircraft never enters the Western market, it could sell between 100 and 150 units in this scenario. This would be a strategic victory in itself, as Russia wants to demonstrate its political and economic power. Scenario 2, cooperation with China. China has announced that it will help Russia if there is a problem with the Chinese aircraft. Some experts are even discussing the possibility of producing the MC-21 under license in China. Both countries could benefit from this. However, there is only one way for this to happen, and that is to reach a very good agreement between them. China tends to be extremely patriotic when it comes to marketing its own goods. Scenario 3, possibility of worldwide certification. This scenario is one that even the world barely does. If this aircraft is accepted in the West, and certainly in America, there is a 100% chance that we will see this aircraft in the air. As a result, the aircraft will be able to compete in open markets in Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Europe. Its low-cost advantage could attract the attention of small airlines, especially if it enters the used aircraft market. However, given the state of politics today, this seems unlikely. Anyway, the main question raised by the MC-21 is whether it can end the Airbus-Boeing rivalry. If it can, the MC-21 could be a key player in this change. An engineering triumph, but politically marginalized, the MC-21 could continue to be isolated if the world follows only Western standards in safety, procurement, and certification. Although the MC-21 is categorized as a narrow-body aircraft, it has a significant fuselage diameter advantage. The MC-21 has a fuselage diameter of 4.06 meters. The A320neo fuselage has a diameter of 3.95 meters. The 737 MAX has a fuselage diameter of 3.76 meters. According to passengers, there is a comfort difference between these aircraft. Passengers can enjoy the following advantages on the MC-21: 18.5-inch wide seats instead of just 18 inches, a wider aisle, larger overhead luggage compartments. This makes it a more comfortable choice, especially for flights longer than 5 or 6 hours. Two engine options are being considered for the MC-21. 1. Western version, PW1400GJM. The A320neo is powered by Pratt & Whitney's GTF geared turbofan engine. Its fuel efficiency makes it stand out. PD-14, developed by Aviat Vigatel, this aircraft is entirely Russian-made. Although it is a newer generation engine, its test history has not been as good as the above engine. Fuel efficiency, PW1400G, approximately 16 to 18% less fuel used compared to A320ceo. PD-14, similar in theory, but currently there is little operational data. When equipped with any of these engines, the MC-21 aims to outperform its competitors in terms of operating costs. The aircraft uses less fuel overall, especially due to the composite wing structure. The completely new wing structure of the MC-21, consisting of a large number of composite materials, is one of its most creative features. Most of the materials used in the wings are lightweight materials, and the reason for this is to save fuel. Wingspan 35.9 meters. The goal of a high rate of laminar flow or a unique surface profile that reduces friction. This allows the MC-21 to navigate more efficiently, especially when it comes to altitude and speed stability. Wide-body aircraft, such as the Boeing 787 and Airbus A350, are among the very few aircraft built from such a large proportion of lightweight materials. The modern, fully digital glass cockpit concept is incorporated into the cockpit of the MC-21.
Advanced synthetic vision systems.
Large-screen, multifunction displays.
Fly-by-wire control system.
Traditional yoke instead of the sidebar found on Airbus aircraft. This is also planning to make an aircraft that pilots know and aims to make better flight. Technically, the MC-21 could be ready. However, engineering is not the only aspect of commercial aviation. Geopolitics, supply chain, and certification are the real rules of the game. The MC-21 faces three significant obstacles here. It is currently legal only in Russia. However, at least FAA USA or EASA Europe approval is required for it to fly in Western markets. Flying it in other countries is zero, of course, in Western countries. Given the Russia-Ukraine conflict, sanctions, and technological differences, it is unlikely that the MC-21 will receive certification from these organizations anytime soon. This means that the MC-21 will fly only in a small part of the world market. In other words, it will seek customers based on geopolitical blocks rather than airlines. In fact, when the MC-21 was first built, it was intended to use materials used by Western countries, but Putin did not allow this. The aircraft had the following features: Collins Aerospace Avionics USA, PW-14G engines USA, and Western components such as Honeywell and Thales. When Putin refused to authorize this, Russia's own materials were used, and this aircraft was born. In other words,
engine, domestic PD-14.
Russian, Turkish, and Chinese joint procurement for cabin systems. Avionics, Kret and Rostec companies domestic. The reason why Western materials were wanted to be used at first is the following. Russia's materials are of inferior quality, so the Western countries use better quality materials. This poses a risk for airlines. If an aircraft lacks service support, it is considered economically unreliable, regardless of its efficiency. But these challenges are not the only factors that will determine the fate of the MC-21. What makes it interesting is its potential to fill a gap, in particular in developing countries.
In sanctioned markets.
This aircraft is not being built with a lot of money and is being built with little cost and budget, even though it uses state-of-the-art technology. Similar to China's Comac C919, this could be a glimpse into a future of aviation independent of the West. Airbus, although it does not see the MC-21 as a commercial threat, the A321XLR is following this aircraft very closely and considers it to be a competitor. Why? Airbus thinks that it has won itself in this race because it has always won, but this time it may be wrong. And the reason he thinks so is that he has infrastructure in many places and has the opportunity to sell the aircraft everywhere. Boeing, the company's next-generation single-aisle jet plan, also known as the new 757, is still on hold, although the reputation of the 737 MAX family is still trying to recover. Boeing has received a clear message from the rise of the MC-21, Russia in saying that you are not the only one in this world. However, Boeing currently does not have a response strategy for the MC-21, because the MC-21 is already automatically banned from entering the US market due to sanctions. What makes the MC-21 so important for Russia? This aircraft is not just an airline product. The MC-21 is in reality a strategic independence project. For the first time since the 1990s, Russia will produce such a passenger aircraft. The PD-14 and other engines represent the revival of the Russian aviation engine industry. Rosaviatsia's full control over the certification of the aircraft introduces a new idea: certification sovereignty. In other words, the MC-21 is much more than an aircraft. If this aircraft is successful, Russia will depend on itself and will achieve successes that will make a name for itself in the world. Boeing 737 MAX 10, Airbus A321XLR, and even the iconic 757, each is a symbol of its era. But the MC-21 is a very different force. A modern engineered aircraft intertwined with a geopolitical environment. Technically speaking, spacious cabin, revolutionary composite wings, very long range. But on the international scene, there are political limits, certification barriers, and risks of spare parts availability. The MC-21 therefore resembles both a window into the future and a contemporary jet following an old steam locomotive. Faithful but isolated. However, the creation of this aircraft will prove to the whole world that aeroplanes are not only made in the West. The MC-21 is important for Russia for reasons beyond just building an aircraft. It embodies the strategy of creating systems different from the West, developing autonomous technology and controlling its own domestic market. In addition, This aircraft has the power to change even the politics in the world. The future of the MC-21 is therefore intertwined with alliances, energy, diplomacy, and even conflict, as well as engineering. Therefore, the most important question remains, is it more important to convince people to fly it or to create a fantastic aircraft? Let's discuss this in the comments section.